Hello and welcome to Campaign Comrades, your favorite Let's gaming podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and today we have a little bit of a different episode. We're going to be doing a topical dive into, the state of labor in gaming, and I'm here today with my co-hosts.
How's it going, guys? I'm Ben.
Me, Matt.
What's up? It's Rick. Me, Matt. Nice to meet you, man. I'm not familiar.
So have we met before? Pleasure seeing you here. Yeah, let's go.
All right, so today, like I said, we're doing like a little bit of a topical episode. You guys have, our listeners have heard them before, but this time we're focusing on labor in gaming. So, how we're going to work through this today is, talk a bit about the state of labor in the U.S. kind of writ large, and then you use gaming as a case study of the harms that have been done to laborers, to workers in the current American structure, and use this as a case study to show through these up and coming kind of movements of solidarity amongst workers in that sector, like how other industries could use that as a model and build solidarity of their own. We're gonna kind of work through quickly, so you don't have to listen to my voice drone on forever. Just like the state of U.S. labor, because I see on the internet a lot of people misrepresenting how labor solidarity is built in this country, and kind of misrepresenting how the law works, and not understanding how it is structured against us. People have kind of heard of the misclassification of labor, and I'm sure everyone here has heard of it with like the issues with Uber misclassifying their employees as like independent contractors when they're really doing the work of an employee, and it's a way to cut costs and eliminate benefits to the workers. But another issue that I think some of us here, I know I have been a victim of it. The misclassification of employees themselves is another one that has been going on, at least in the past 20 years.
I think it's worth asking, like, misclassified according to who, right?
Yeah, and like that's a big point.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the idea of how to of labor solidarity in this country. I think that's kind of funny at this point in time, because realistically there isn't any labor solidarity in this country currently. Like we are starting from pretty much close to zero. The ruling class has really done a good job to eliminate that, as you said, through these laws and the things that we're talking about in this episode.
Yeah, no, it's set up to fail. There's
100%.
There is very little ground to stand on, and that's it's designed to be that way. The system is functioning exactly as it's intended. That should never be forgotten. This is not like unforeseen consequences.
Not a bug, it's a feature.
There you go.
Exactly. And the only quote unquote unforeseen consequences are like the new and novel ways that the ruling class tries to kind of recycle the
squeeze as much that they can.
And a lot of times when you look at it, it's frustrating because they are just recycling something else into like a new application, and you almost kick yourself for not seeing it. There definitely are people that do see it, some of which get ignored. Yeah, and so to Rick's point about labor solidarity at zero, it's almost arguably at a negative. We're starting from a negative point, having to fight these structures that are just systemically preventing us from building that solidarity. And I think one of the funniest outcomes of kind of the miseducation of workers within the U.S. economy is these, because I'm an internet freak, as many of us are here, just seeing the general strike Twitter organizing that, the idea that
me as an idiot who has no history or experience with labor organizing can see how fucking stupid and short-sighted that
is. And that the idea of a labor strike where everyone could just like take off a day of work and cause some big disruption to the whole economy. That only happens if both the workers and management are starting at zero, but management is 1,000 times ahead of us, because they have the control and have
and have for decades
and have continued to
they have built this power in a meaningful
Exactly.
way. They are executing power in the way it should be, in a way that is effective. It's not something that can just be picked up and thrown down. It is a process that is decades, if not centuries, in the making.
I think an interesting part of this that is maybe a little more unique to our fucked up country is how the stupid individualism that a lot of people put and integrate into what they think about labor fucks with all of this, because it just keeps everyone a little bit more less willing to want to try and create these larger groups, because they feel and they've been told and lied to that these larger groups are somehow going to result in them having less individuality or personal freedoms, or things that benefit them will somehow be taken away if they give into these larger group ideas that labor and organizing have always been associated with. I think that's kind of unique to our country, and really also is a big factor in overcoming our current status and actually effectively organizing.
Yeah, I mean,
because everyone else is out to get you. Everyone else is competition. There is no meaningful societal connection today. There is no understanding that say working together can actually get you more money.
And I think that you pointed out, Rick, that America has a unique history in this, that we are the only comparable nation that doesn't have some strong, make that definition take it with a grain of salt, but a strong union base. If you go over to Europe, unions are still a thing. They're have historically, even with the erosion by the capitalist ruling class, there still has been a union presence, where it's been almost completely eroded and just relegated to very niche categories of the economy, or the workplace, that there are unions, and they're typically quote unquote unskilled labor, and that's another taint to unions, is that what we know unions as are custodial unions, and things like that. So people associate them with
that darn
unskilled
teachers
labor
union.
Well, yeah, and then we've had where there are professional unions, the media has just for decades had a propaganda campaign against how teachers unions and the fact that they have tenure is preventing your child from getting the best learning, and the New York rubber rooms where we sent all the bad teachers because we couldn't fire them. But that is not a structure of the union, but a structure of the management and the system in which we are hiring and keeping on those teachers.
Police union good though.
Always got to protect the boys in blue.
These things compound on each other, right? It's the lack of union density is what makes people more susceptible to the anti-worker propaganda, because people have no experience with a union. They have no one in their family who has had any recent experience. Since the last time we had actual strong union participation, all those people have died out. It's your great grandparents and shit. They're all dead now. So they're no longer here to
in the ground like Hoffa.
Yeah, they're not here to counteract the the agitprop.
And another because of the lack of union density in this propaganda against unions, the ruling class and management has been able to perniciously slip in these different changes to the economy, to labor laws, to hiring practices, to get things like independent contractors. The biggest trend in in employment right now is like figuring out ways to get rid of employees and only hire independent contractors. Pretty soon, I keep saying it, everyone's going to be an LLC. Like you are going to have to operate as an LLC, and you are going to be like contracting out you as a business, your own labor, because that's how they would like to set it up so that they don't have to pay any fringe benefits. They don't have to be held accountable to anyone because you are your own business, operating at an equal playing field with the larger corporation, even though, in reality, the power balance there is ridiculous. You'll be coming there both as businesses, contracting freely, and, you're just going to get fucked. This ability to, what is called like fissure the workplace, and, the lack of union density not only changed, like domestic hiring practices, but also just, the outsourced, globalization process where, there's a race to the bottom for manufacturing across the world to find who has, the cheapest labor and the least regulations. And, though that won't be so much the topic of this episode, because we'll largely be focusing on like the developers and the labor in that area of gaming. It does well to note that there's all sorts of labor within the video game sector, that there's bad labor practices up and down. You think from gathering the cobalt to get the chips up and running, the labor practices in the Congo, where
quote unquote labor practices.
Exactly. Slavery. Cough.
Slavery.
But that's a product of the fissured workplace where you move away from this Fordist model where like everything is domestically like created and produced with the resources available, to like this globalized, broken up economy where there's slavery happening in the Congo and these cobalt mines, and say Sony is distancing themselves from those practices because it's not in the contract. They're not technically aware of it, and they have like all these legal shields and veils that they could put in front of them to get away with this practice and still continue to exploit the labor.
Yeah, and just let's not forget, capitalism as a whole requires the exploitation of labor to successfully work. Like that's it is built on that.
I think this is a perfect snapshot of the contradictions inherent in capitalism, at least the logical ones, because what is the argument for having this kind of fissured post-Fordist industry, right? It's that it's the most efficient manner, meaning it's the most efficient for capital, meaning it costs the most money, not that it is actually the cleanest, the fastest, the true, when you get to the true sense of efficiency. Because think about like the sheer fact of how this has impacted global emissions and things like that through the sheer idiocy of moving one, like a Nike shoe being the pieces cut out in one factory in Bangladesh, shipped to another part of like China to sew this stitch and get the laces on another one. Like it's like crisscrossed the globe like 5 times. But because, we have set up these systems so that the labor cost it completely X's out all the extra cost of travel, it is therefore deemed efficient.
Yeah, no, we it's never included in the statement, but essentially whenever you hear about efficiency referred to in these conversations, like they're not talking about real efficiency. They're talking about capital or economic efficiency, which is just like ultimately just driven by what you said. Where is the lowest cost? So they're going to continue to go to those places and capitalize, literally.
What strengthens profit at all? That's it.
Yeah. 100%.
The only criteria.
Yeah, and this is a symptom of what I will call the platform economy, and there's different definitions for it. It's also the treat economy is all plays into this.
Give me those treats, or I'll riot.
And it's just like at its core, calling it the treat economy, or like the discussion of the platform economy, is kind of just like a new way of looking at a new descriptive way to look at our economy, because the descriptions that we apply to what has actually happened don't fit what is actually happening in the economy. So it's so to say, labor has this cross section of like antitrust and the current underpinnings of our American economic system that you have to attend to at all instances. And this is why a general strike will not work. You cannot just pick up and leave that. And so, I think this is a good segue into the gaming industry itself. That is not to say that strikes and labor solidarity will not work. So, we've seen an uptick in the gaming industry in like labor coming together, building solidarity and tackling some of the issues that they've been dealing with, whether it is like these more pernicious kind of like built-in systems, legal systems that have an effect on them, or like their day-to-day interactions within the workplace that are also a product of, of labor under capitalism, and this idea of economic efficiency and squeezing the most out of the worker. So, first I just want to give a quick, idea of, what we've talked about, just more specifically how it applies to gaming. And then, I figured it would be best to hear some of the firsthand experiences because none of us are in the gaming industry. So I have some quotes that I've found of like what is going on, how these practices and are day to day affecting workers, and these larger workplace practices, what harms they've done, and how those harms have kind of helped to bring people together and begin chipping away at the power that capital has over us as workers. As we're recording this, it's the day after the Raven software, had a vote on signature cards to ask for a true vote on the union. Those QA testers themselves happen to be employees of Raven software, but there are QA testers. They're one of the groups that is more easily susceptible to the independent contractor model. Because
weren't all the ones who were infamously fired by Activision,
correct.
Weren't they all contractors?
Correct. They were all independent contractors. Just it's an easy job description to fit the independent contractor model because they're typically coming in for one game. Independent contractor in this sense is supposed to be like a consultant. So it was like built off this consultant model that like at least in this type of workplace, you come in, you offer your expertise for a project, and then you leave. So you're just paying as a separate business person.
So like, I don't, this is something that I just don't understand with this though, is my thought was that in being a contractor, I guess, is it that you can't be told how to complete the work,
Correct.
but you can be told what to complete? Is that what the distinction is?
Yes, that's kind of like supposed to be like the, I'll say, colloquial distinction, or like
Yeah.
in practice, like that was kind of like how the independent contractor originated. But then you're bringing up another standard that is applied to the misclassification of employees. So you have to think of it at different levels and like tiers. Independent contractors are their own business, or own LLC, whatever, that are offering their services to the other corporation, and they have a contract for work. It could have a certain project, a certain time period. It could be indefinite, whatever. Then there's employees which are directly employed by and work for the company. But then within those employees, there's another misclassification that happens. Rick, we're similar to this independent contractor employee distinction, where it's like you can't be told how to do it, just like what to do. So like a lot of employees will be put in exempt positions where they supposedly have more freedom. and usually those are people that are not allowed to get overtime because supposedly their salary is set at a higher rate, sometimes by statute, sometimes, supposedly just by like the market forces, that this is supposed to be like a higher level job, which you presumably have more experience or education for. Essentially, you could manage yourself. But what happens is it largely gets used as a way to prevent employees from being unionized, because the NLRB has taken those employees out of the pool that's eligible to unionize because they are considered management. And when there's like an actual union election going on, the NLRB will kind of pick and choose and maybe say like, we don't think this position should be exempt, like you're doing this wrong, and there's a negotiation. But largely that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. You're still looking at the power dynamics there of like the company's lawyers versus the union's lawyers kind of arguing that point, and why these employees should be in the exempt status of employees and therefore exempt from the union. And that is one of the bigger issues within labor and gaming that we're definitely going to see in the Raven software unionizing.
And are they employees directly of is Raven a contractor, or was it was Raven contracting?
Raven is a subsidy of Activision that had, so they had, I believe, and Ben, you might be able to correct me, they had QA testers that were independent contractors that got fired from Raven.
Okay.
From Raven.
And I didn't know if it was Raven or Activision, but yeah, so Raven.
No, it was
and
Raven.
Then these other QA testers who were not independent contractors, so they had the ability to unionize, took unionization action. So that they went on strike, and now they're the ones working with CWA. Yeah, so we'll have more on them later. We'll work through some of the issues there. But in the meantime,
I mean, the thing that's kind of scary about this is like, as you look at where, what we've talked about in some of our other podcasts and episodes, and like where the industry is going in terms of consolidation and what these larger entities are going to do. Like, when does Microsoft start just contracting out the game development of Call of Duties on a go forward basis? And, they'll be paying half the cost of what they were paying initially to make those games, still making the same money. And, what's that impact to you? Well, as the consumer, you're just going to get an even worse Call of Duty than what we've been currently getting, which
you might get it for cheaper or the same price.
Yeah. While Microsoft continues to make a ton of money.
No, I think you bring up a good point. And I do think that is a route that the industry is going to go. From someone I know at an indie studio, he was telling me that, he was looking, he's out in Silicon Valley now, but looking to move back home because they've gone a complete remote model. And that's a move throughout the industry.
Doesn't have to live in like the most expensive place in the country.
Exactly. And could afford to buy a home back by his parents, or where he's from. And that is something that this industry has had forever. Like, a lot of these games, even these big name games, like, developers aren't just in Silicon Valley. They're working with developers all across the country. And that has just been like a trend throughout video games, because.
And not just the country. They're working with studios all over the world. Yeah, I
meant to say all over the world. So thank you for correcting me. And the reason they've historically done that is because video games have been an international form of entertainment. So they want to make sure that they could appeal to all, it is like the perfect form of neoliberal capitalism. You're like watering it down to like the most bare bones that everyone can,
It's like I said before, it's the least common denominator. It's like something that is so inoffensive that it can't piss anybody off. It's not that anybody gets excited about it. It's that it pisses off the least people.
Yeah.
And so, like, because they've historically had that that built-in structure that they were working somewhat remote, in that, they were working with colleagues all around the world. Now, because of COVID and, the movement towards remote and, them embracing that, I foresee another race to the bottom. If there is a lot of union action going on in the US, well, we're just going to get developers in India where there's no union action. They work for cheaper. They work more hours, and they give us the same quality work, or diminished quality, but a diminished amount that we don't care, because it was the diminished quality we were going to look for our US workers anyways, because we were going to milk, whatever labor out of them.
I mean, it's a diminished quality that because you're paying less, you can afford that, because who cares at that value?
Exactly.
You at that value, you can afford to QA test a little better when it comes across.
Yeah. And I don't even think, I think you're absolutely right that that's what the future looks like for this industry, because you've seen that in other more mature industries. Literally I'm in the financial industry, and like you see companies literally firing all of their like on staff accounting departments, like everyone that would do like the journal entries, all of that is getting, those people are being fired, they're losing their jobs, and they're being done by contractors in India, because everyone they're able to work for literally like 25 cents on the dollar. Yep. Comparatively, it's a no-brainer from a capital decision and an economic one, and that, as Ben said at the beginning, is the driver of all decision making at this point.
Yeah, and so I got doomer for a second, but like
it's okay. It happens.
Washed over me.
It does. It happens.
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't.
Exactly. That's the thing that sucks about it. It's like, I mean, the only answer is we actually finally develop some sort of labor organization and change this shit. But like, see how that goes. If this is already in the works, which I'm sure it is, that they're working to slowly outsource at the cheapest cost, they don't care if the Raven QA testers organize, because okay, we have to keep a 25-person union in America, whatever. We're just going to outsource the rest to India, so it doesn't matter.
And it's good PR for them then.
And it's good PR because they accepted a union. Yeah, exactly. So it's a win-win. All right, I might need to take a breather for a second, because that threw off the course of this episode. But I think that's a really important point and a good thing to discuss. So I'm glad it came up. But we're going to go from doomer to, I guess, more doomer, because we're going to talk about the exact, workplace practices that are going on, out in the open, that are causing kind of this unionization effort and historically have. So one thing I want to point out that I know I really appreciated, and I know Ben said he did as well, this series of articles that I pulled some of these quotes from, one of them that really jumped out at me that I wanted to hit at the top before we go through some of these other ones and discuss some of the out in the open issues is this article quoted a worker activist saying that within the industry and like within the labor organizers, they don't like calling it crunch. We hear in the media the gaming industry and their use of crunch, which is essentially just excessive unpaid overtime. And that's the term that the organizers used. And I as a law student appreciate the preciseness of like what is going on. And I think it does add to more of the weight. And this activist had, said that organizers don't use the term crunch because it's too funky and it kind of infantilizes what is actually going on.
It's cute and quirky.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very like neoliberal marketing, PR, communications.
I mean, yeah, you see studio leads like using crunch as like a marketing thing. It's like, we had to like put in like 100-hour work weeks. Isn't that so cool? We put so much effort into this, let alone like all my employees are like having mental health breakdowns and like getting put on suicide watch.
Well, and so, one of the big problems in the industry because of this excessive overtime, and it's not a problem that the corporations see as a problem, but a problem for the worker, is kind of the turnover of developers within the industry. I have a quote here, and it's a quote that hits both on like the excessive overtime and the diversity. And so this worker that's being interviewed says, it's a workload designed for young men without families or carrying responsibilities who can dedicate their entire lives to the job. And indeed, the demographic of the industry bears this out. So then in the article, it says recent surveys of the UK gaming workforce found that a vast majority were young men, only 14% were women. And as far as workers of color, in 2015, they had made up a dismal 4%. In the United States, meanwhile, a 2019 study found that 19% of the workforce was female, while a slightly better 32% identified as something other than white. And then when the appeal of working on games no longer trumps the desire to have a life outside of work, programmers leave and go into a different industry. Their skills might have been honed to make blockbuster games, but the same code that makes up the backbone of Red Dead Redemption, also could be used in fintech applications for more money. So, to me, that's sad to see that people going into the industry, one, are just largely, it's catered towards this one demographic, and, structurally so. And it's a demographic that may be going in because they think they're going to enjoy the work and then have to sell out at the end because.
Yeah, it's really kind of sick and twisted at the end. It's because it's like relying upon the passions of its creators and just using that as a tool against them. It's just like, we are like, aren't you so lucky that you get to work in this industry to make games, the things that you love more than anything in the world. But here, that means that you got to put up with these abysmal conditions. We need to work you to the bone, harass you. Like if you're a woman, you like are going to be treated worse. You're going to be paid worse. You're going to not be given opportunities for promotion, and you have no ground to complain because
you're doing what you
there
love.
are 20 you're doing what you love, and there are 20 more recent grads who also are just burning to get into the industry, and they will take this job at the drop of a dime. So you have no point of leverage. And particularly, again, it's like when we are in this atomized workspace, we have to rely upon others. That's our only possible way to claw back any type of autonomy in our workplace. And this is, I think, again, a pure one of the purest examples of that, because again, we're talking about people who want to be here. We're talking about people who have dreams and desires that are being exploited and manipulated.
Yeah, and all that is happening for what's probably no real benefit to anyone except the shareholders. Like, look no further than the stories about Cyberpunk coming out and CD Projekt Red, all the crunch they did. That it's been a year, that game's still not finished. Like, what they did to those people wasn't actually worth it from any sort of creative or gameplay or development perspective. It was purely from a monetary one.
Right. It's another contradiction. It is the fact that these intense periods of largely unpaid overtime has no tangible effect on the outputs of the games. It does not increase efficiency. In fact, there are so many reports, and I think we've got quotes that I may be skipping ahead here, but they in fact often end up introducing more flaws, more problems, end up producing worse games. And it's like there was one story that we read where it's like they're in this persistent level of crunch, and yet the project was always remaining on schedule.
Yeah,
it had no effect on the schedule whatsoever. Almost like they planned it that way.
Yeah, for real. Well, and like, again, to your point, you just said there's, in a lot of instances, these things sometimes introduce more problems, and of course that's the case. They're overworked and they're working on things too quickly. So garbage in, garbage out is a pretty true statement in most facets. And same thing here. Like, you can't, if you're half asleep and working on 4 different things at the same time, the quality is just gonna decline.
I'd like to point out with your Cyberpunk 2077 reference there that that game went on sale on Steam. And now all of a sudden the reviews are all positive and everyone's happy about the game again. So to them they're good. They sold more of it. And, doesn't matter that the game isn't finished yet.
Say, hey, I'm guilty. I bought it. It was on sale at a reasonable price. I bought it. I'll play it like in a year from now when maybe it's actually finished.
And ultimately,
there's their success. Hurt. They got their sales.
Right. They got me. They got me, man.
They got their sales. Their stock price is up. It's like they're not even down from where they lost some of their stock price did decline initially, but since then it's above where it was before they released the game because they still made a fuck ton of cash.
Well, and I think back to the top of this section talking about crunch and relabeling it. What Ben said, like it's built into the business model now, and they're being, they're obfuscating it a bit, but they're being open about it with ads of like how much time they put into it. Well, you didn't put your money where your mouth is. Like, you put a lot of time in it, but you didn't treat the people properly, and there's still going to be bugs. And so I have another quote here about the excessive overtime. It becomes a circular problem. Hours stretch longer and longer as junior developers scramble to fix bugs. They get tired of the struggle and quit, and then a new person with even less practice is plugged into their spot. And the company's idea of how to make the job more sustainable is put in a ping pong table and give out free food. Let's put a bed in there.
Man, I want to work there.
Put in showers. Studio Gobo's website promotes Gobo Friday lunch with freshly cooked free food by our in-house chef, and the only rule is that you're not allowed to sit next to the people you did last week.
Dude, that is like some grade school fucking shit that just weirds me.
If my work told me that I wasn't allowed to like sit next to the people, I would just go to my car and I would eat in my car.
Yeah, right. It's like fuck you.
I'm not gonna participate.
I would go to my car and like watch YouTube videos in my car and eat there.
Don't want your free pizza.
When do they provide just like a private room for jerking off? Because like that's the next step, right? Yeah. Like they gotta do something.
That's what the pods are for.
Yeah. Don't take a black light in there.
Pods. Yeah.
So you haven't seen the strewn socks around the developer desks? Isn't that the joke with anime studios?
The worker being interviewed here, Aguaze, I think is his name. I of course butchered that and I apologize. But he said that, most of the time I'm just going home to bed and waking up to go back again. I don't remember what happened. I just remember going to bed and being in the office again. And I think like not only for the gaming industry, that's a pretty apt description for I think a lot of people's experience with working in modern America. I know that rung home for me with many jobs. And
when I worked at GE, that was wake up at 3:30 in the morning, on the road by 4:30, get to work at 6, work till 3:30, get home by 5, like eat, play games for like 2 hours, go to bed, wake up, start over.
Yeah, and even the ability to have those 2 hours to play games, like you're privileged than most people.
That's a luxury. That's
those
a luxury,
2 hours
man.
were eating into sleep time. That was taking away from.
No, exactly. 100%. And like this is, it gets in the news, this idea.
I was saying you're a single guy with no kids.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Look at my fur kid right here.
This idea comes up in the news a lot with like Uber drivers and like DoorDash, because a lot of, especially in LA is a big one where a lot of those Dashers or Uber drivers aren't from like LA proper, LA County. They're driving in like 2-3 hours from the suburbs in order to drive somewhere where they can make money, and they're like sleeping in their cars to do so, or they go home just to put their head on the pillow to turn around and go back again. And well, that is horrible. That is going on in every industry in some form or another. And it just shows how, capitalism continues to exploit the worker, no matter where they are.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned something earlier when you talked about, the demands of this job. or the person talked about the demands of this job and who it attracts, and it's like someone that can give their entire life to their job. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Fuck that idea. That idea is insane.
That's every
No one
career
should
now.
give their entire life to anything. No career, no, nothing. It doesn't even matter. No career, no hobby. Nothing should be your entire life. That idea is fucking gross. I hate it. It makes me so upset.
Thank you, Protestant work ethic. You have done a number
Yeah.
on us.
Ugh.
You
But,
mean
you
making
know, and
gaming my whole life is a bad thing?
And
But yeah, and that's only the case if you're playing the same game.
Yeah.
See, with me, like, yeah, I'm just playing different games.
Just play different games. There you go. That's
I don't have a problem. You have a problem. I can stop whenever I want.
And, you know, like in the gaming industry and like Silicon Valley kind of writ large, this idea of like, you know, we'll put in pods or we'll give you free food or, you know, nap time or whatever. We're a family, you know, we're going to give you, we'll have pizza parties. Yay. Don't you want your free pizza?
Or in the case of that other company, I forget
Happy
the name
hour.
of it, the Fampany.
Yes.
The Fampany.
Yeah.
We're a Fampany here.
Fampany.
Yeah, and like that's a trend across all sectors, but you know, it just became it's a meme here. And you know, that is what, you know, the corporations, that's their form of virtue signaling, you know, for labor. Like that's how they're going to say, like, look, we are doing something to change our workplace culture. We're more of a family. Families don't discriminate against each other. Families don't talk about politics. You know,
They don't sexually assault each other. Depending on your family.
you know, these families will, you know, beg to differ.
Sweet home Alabama intensifies.
Yeah. But you know, this idea that you know, the one quote here says, "We make art, we don't make politics," and I think we could safely say here, the corporations are making no art, the developers are, and if it was the, you know, up to the corporations, it would be washed of art completely. But you know, there's this idea of like we said, watering it down so that we don't, you know, lowest common denominator, we can't make anyone angry. We're not making any political statements. That comes out in
no political statements yet. In the last Spider-Man game, he's literally a cop.
Yeah,
exactly.
He literally boasts about being Spider Cop.
And so what that comes down to is no political statements that are going to disrupt the current status quo. So we as America love licking the boot of cops, putting cops in, and you know, cops being the main focus of a video game is not political, but you know, I think that's you hit that right on the head there. It's they're not afraid of political statements. It's about what is our reality. That's just, you know, say it is. It's just what is. It's not it's therefore not political.
yeah.
But that's, you know, completely missing the forest for the trees.
And so, you know, what I want to get to here and what I thought was why I like this interview so much and why I want to pull it out is this organizer was part of the Game Workers United in the UK, which kind of kicked off some of the labor solidarity within the gaming industry writ large. So one point I want to bring up is just like, this is an international project. This is an international project that we have to unite as workers across, you know, country lines and borders, because
well, say as socialists here, you know, we got to understand that, you know, such mechanisms cannot exist within borders, cannot exist in one state. They must be, you know, comprehensive.
And just, you know, even on a practical level beyond that, it's just, these are model, you know, international models. And while they may not exactly, you know, port over into the American system, it's like you get ideas, you could, you know, apply it in your own context. There is a lot to learn. And so what happened here in the UK is it was across like UK US lines. In 2018 there was I want to get it right, the 2018 Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. There was a panel titled "Union Now?" Pros and cons and consequences of unionization for game devs. And
Man, I wonder what those consequences
Yeah.
were. I wonder. So that's, to me, that sounds like a very fair and balanced panel right
Only
there.
the fairest and the most balanced. But yeah, I don't think
They totally wouldn't skew that one way. They
You
totally
will
wouldn't
get
do that.
fired if you unionize.
If you ask to be
exactly. So, just on the title, we don't even have to like explain what went down in that panel, and that kind of sparked this. What started as a Facebook group went into a Discord group, and then became a union in the UK, a recognized union, and I believe is what is going to be the. And I may have gotten this wrong. We may have to cut this, but I think will be the union group under the CWA for video games. So it'll be Game Workers United under the CWA. But so this Facebook group, out of like, I'm assuming anger at management's reaction to what was happening at Riot at the time, which is what we're going to jump into next. 2018 is like the first year for labor kind of kicking off some action within the gaming industry. In Riot, I believe it was QA testers as well, started organizing and talking about a union, which ultimately, did not form into a union at Riot. But that union talk made management kind of scared and put out a panel like this, which is just a like virtue signaling centrist, like, yeah, we think, workers' rights are great, but you should really know what a union means because,
we hear you, we see you, you're valid.
Exactly.
But here's how I'm going to keep, just squishing you underneath my boot.
And, but we can't break up the family, and a union breaks up the family. I'm sure that was like the opening line of that panel because, that's the management go-to. And so like the management's reaction to this kind of led to this group forming as a result, because they saw what, at least I think they saw what could be as a union. And so, though a union did not come out of Riot, and, some of the reasons that some Riot organizers gave recently, it was actually when the Riot settlement came out, were kind of like the same story that you hear in a lot of sectors of like burnout from the organizers, and management coming to the table and giving something, even though it was a virtue signal, like a pizza party or something, that just workers being complacent with. To me, that's a result of not knowing what they're worth, that they think that management could give them a pizza party and that's all they'll ever get, and that's good enough.
I mean, I think that is the story of at least American labor, is just like completely undervaluing themselves. We're all just like, I'm not worth enough to ask for it, because like we're all getting screwed over here. Like this is not even questionable, like who's benefiting while the employees are getting harmed.
Because you got to defend what you got now.
Yeah,
because you have no security that tomorrow you may be without a job. You
exactly.
may, and with bills to pay and expectations to be met, and your shit out of luck.
And that's something that,
so don't rock the boat.
Exactly. Don't rock the boat, because even the process of gaining that security is going to put my life even more on the line, and
threaten the current little amount you have.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of unions die, or like union
precarity is a huge motivator.
Yeah.
But like I said, though Riot didn't, everyone was like, Riot's going to be the first union, this is going to be great. It ultimately didn't happen, and that's kind of to be expected. If the first like labor solidarity movement in a given industry yielded a union, that would be a huge fucking win, no matter what industry it is. And so like, that's an expected first step, that there's going to be a push, there's going to be momentum, but it's ultimately not going to yield the final result, but we're going to continue pushing. And that's something that whether the pandemic really like tipped the hand in this industry because of the new business model and of remote work, and being able to further blur the developer's line of like work and personal life that kind of like tipped it off, or just like the natural momentum of the movement. You know, we've seen post those riot walkouts in 2019, post the riot action in 2018, this Game Workers United group starting in 2018. You know, we've seen a lot of progress. And, you know, the day before recording this, we've seen Raven software get the 30% signatures needed to, you know, begin the unionization process.
It should be noted that the percentage was higher than
Yeah, but
I know you're saying that's the threshold, but it was,
I think it was closer to like 70 or above.
It was like 74 or something like that.
Which is great. And, you know, and not only that we see this unionization effort happen, we saw Vadio become the first video game union in North America. And, you know, I bring those two up because they show kind of two paths to unionization in this industry. And obviously one is a small indie studio, Vadio, and the other, you know, one of the, you know, as of this recording, potentially purchased by the third largest video game developer or studio in the nation, with Activision being purchased by Microsoft. Two different routes to what unionization could happen. But I see, Rick, you got something.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add that I think we've kind of been doomer pilled, but I do think there's something you said there that I thought was interesting, and that COVID has kind of helped and tipped the hand a little bit on these things. And I think just as a whole, that the ability of workers in these, you know, I think if we're going to have a real labor movement, it almost has to come from these more like white collar jobs first, because you at least have a little bit more leverage where you need people with degrees, and like there's just a little bit less of a labor pool to immediately farm these jobs out to. But I think that the separation and ability of like people to work from home has led to a little bit less Kool-Aid drinking at like these corporate levels, because they just don't have the ability to be as in your face with that shit when you're working from home. So I think that's allowed people to feel a little bit more like they are just the corporate slaves they are, and B, that they have the ability to build some leverage and have some of these conversations about these experiences and how it has been negative, and how there's certain things that do suck about work in the current environment. So I do have, you know, some positive feelings about what our new work situation, and as you know, this pandemic continues to grip the country and globe, does with that.
So no captured audience meetings when everyone's working from home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, who knows who's doing a tube in behind that Zoom screen. So in this industry, we've seen these two routes, and so I'm just going to go through them quickly because I do think it's important, and I think it's going to mirror what we see in the industry as a whole. Vadio being a very small indie company, they had the vote for the unionization, and so you need to collect signature cards. It's essentially like polling your workers in order to see if, you know, what the desire for a union is. If you get 30%, you go to the NLRB, say, I got my 30%, and we're going to ask the company to voluntarily accept this 30% or higher, and voluntarily accept the union, because we have, you know, we have shown the desire, and the workers clearly want this. A small company like Vadio and the management correctly said this was in our best interest to form the union and not fight it. One, like, we don't have the resources to fight a union. They obviously fit like the criteria, and, you know, we support our workers, so they accept it. And I think you'll see some indie studios not put up too much of a fight if unionization comes about, and that'll vary from studio to studio. But I think that more and more smaller studios will understand and have an easier time unionizing. Big corporations like Activision, we're going to go this second route, where not only are you going to have this polling, you'll actually have to hold a union vote. in doing that, Activision is going to use all of their resources to whittle down the union to be as small as possible and completely say, as small as possible, to say that there's not enough people to even be in the union. Like, that is their ultimate goal, to kick it out. And so whether the vote is 100% for unionization, Activision is still gonna, work to whittle it away, because they don't want the liability of having a union on their staff or in their company, and potentially causing more unionization within the industry and company. But on the flip side, as we talked earlier, if they're going the business model of outsourcing to India, maybe they'll fight it to ultimately show their shareholders that they're fighting it and trying to keep costs down, but then accept it for a PR win, only to outsource later. So, after this episode, I'm a little doomered, and who knows, but that will be the process. There's no way Activision is voluntarily accepting it like Vadio did. So, and this process will drag out probably right up to when Microsoft and Activision's purchase is, set to go through.
I do think that's an interesting distinction. I do feel that indie studios kind of have a leg up in them being smaller, more self-contained. Not that like I'm advocating for like, oh yeah, they are a tight-knit kind of family unit type of thing. No, it's the fact that they realize that they're forced to value their employees more because of the nature of how indie studios work compared to big developers, where there are such fewer people in indie studios, so people have to wear more hats. Yep. So it's harder to replace somebody. They are more valuable. They are worth keeping around and keeping happy. Whereas in a AAA studio where you just have a shit ton of contractors who are like just working on 3D modeling a barrel to go on this COD map, that person is easily replaced. Yeah. That person can be replaced in a fucking heartbeat. So they, again, have their precarity is much greater.
Well, I also think that, not trying to advocate for in any way for like a family culture within any sort of corporation, but indie studios can actually cultivate a culture other than, like the harassing culture that big game studios develop. But that is just like, is the culture of misogyny that happens.
Gamer culture.
The culture of violence that is just endemic to our society.
So that is separate, but like you could cultivate I'll say a positive culture, or a culture that you want within an indie studio. So you can, in knowing that people are going to have to wear multiple hats, it's like you're going to bring in people that are kind of like-minded to you, that have these abilities, so that you already have people that may be turned on to the ideas of unionization. Whereas in Activision, you have the gambit from your libertarian incel Reddit user that is doing some sort of modeling for one game, all the way to your crunchy anarchist, blue-haired feminist on the other end. So like you have a large swath of people in this huge corporation where like I said, the culture is going to be much more like
nebulous and undefinable.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's just the practical reality.
And that's why you run into people that you're more likely to find people that are going to be like apathetic in those bigger cultures than you would at an indie studio. And again, like I don't think every indie studio is going to voluntarily accept. There's true. A lot of them are still going to try to pick away at who is who's exempt from the union, who could be in the unit, things like that. Like, lawyers are always going to hash that out. It's the degree that they're going to be hashing it out, how long it's going to go, how many people are going to be exempt. And I would guess, an indie studio head could be more likely persuaded that a union is going to be, a benefit to them, or at least like not too much of a detriment, that they'll be more likely to accept it. Where Activision, Microsoft, whoever, it's the same thing with Amazon. They have the resources to fight it. They're going to throw everything they can at the matter to stop it. Again, unless they decide to accept it and just outsource to India and take the PR win. But, we'll see what happens there. But, I think that's kind of like where I wanted to wrap it up, kind of get us up to date. Just like, didn't want this episode to go too deep into it, but just kind of give a good overview. But I just want to kick it to
because these are issues that are going to evolve, and that things that we're going to talk about a lot, hopefully over the future of the podcast. So yeah, this was a good groundwork.
Yeah, exactly. Baseline, get out some of our ideas on the subject. But yeah, so if you guys have any thoughts, anything you want to add, any takeaways, go for it.
Just I always say solidarity with any any developers that are pursuing unionization. To remember that this is a process. There are those that are more knowledgeable that they should be reaching out to, and we should not be expecting immediate wins.
Yes, process of building power, building that solidarity.
Yeah, I think we said that earlier. Yeah, it's like we on the left are unpracticed in the wielding of power, let alone the building of it. So this is like, there's a tendency, particularly along the online left, to put the cart before the horse kind of thing. With it's just we see people online are agreeing with us, so there must be this groundswell of support.
We got 500 likes.
That's not how things work. And it's like we are fighting such an uphill battle that we've got to be cautious at every single step of the way, and have to be kind of building up those bulwarks against, again, the institutional power that is just a reality.
Yeah, and to that point, I think Marx set a good example of this. You need to understand the power you're up against. Like, you need to understand the workings of capital before you can try to dismantle it. Otherwise, you're going to run into more issues. And part of the reason I wanted to do this episode is to bring up some of the other issues that intersect with labor, antitrust, the economy, that have effects and consequences for actions done by laborers. And I think that's something that, the online left forgets. If you tell a bunch of Uber drivers to take a day off, or, demand higher wages, not only is there practical consequences to them of like missing the day off work and, their income, et cetera, you're potentially putting them up against antitrust liability that, they don't know about, you don't know about, and there's no structure to defend them against if action were taken against them. So I think that's something else to remember. We need to deeply understand what is going on and what could be used against us as leftists. All right. So I think that is it for today. I hope everyone enjoyed.
Till next time.
Peace. Bye.
Bye.